So, everyone, thank you for tonight. I'm so excited about this class because I actually wrote it at the request of a regional school unit in Maine that I work with, a lovely group that I work with there. So I wrote this class for them. So I'm really excited to actually show this for the first time ever. You get it hot off the press, and these are some of my favorite recipes. I absolutely adore chickpeas or garbanzo beans, whatever you want to call them. There's 9,000 reasons I love them, and I'll share all of that with you tonight. So just so you know, again, my name is Alicia Randolph Lucchese. This is from when I was in college in April of 1994. I went vegetarian in 1990. I now call it plant-based just to it's a lot easier and it's a little more familiar with people. When I went to college, it was rural North Carolina. So it was this tiny little town of maybe like 1,500 people, and 1,000 of them were the college kids. So there weren't a whole lot of vegetarian options. It was a perfect excuse for me to fall off the wagon my freshman year of college. And in May of 1993, I went to a Paul McCartney concert because I've always been a huge Beatles fan, still am. And at that concert, he opened it with a 5-minute video that just showed what happens to animals in factory farms, furriers, et cetera, et cetera. And that was it. I left that concert and have never touched meat since then. But the same problems that I had when I went to college were the same problems that I had when I got out of that concert, where I was a college kid that didn't have a whole lot of money. I was graduating with a bachelor's degree in 3 years, not 4, because I couldn't afford to stay for 4 years. So I was taking extra heavy loads. Again, it was rural North Carolina back in the 90s, so not a whole lot of options. If you wanted vegetarian pizza, or vegan pizza, we just got it without cheese because it's not like you had all kinds of fancy toppings that you could put on it. I was also working part-time in a steakhouse. I worked in the salad bar, so it was a good job, but we didn't have a lot to work with. So we had to make do with what we had, and that's where a lot of the things that I've learned have come from, is from those struggles of how to substitute foods and make them healthy on a budget without, and with staying healthy. So I started studying health in the mid 90s once I graduated college. And then as I was doing that, I went, so that's interesting. All of these ancient cultures and these indigenous tribes, a lot of them are naturally plant-based because they just don't have access to meat. So, and they also tend to be some of the healthiest. So if you look at the blue zones, a lot of those are vegetarians. So I just went, oh, this is interesting. It just solidified it more and more of how healthy it was to be plant-based, how inexpensive it can be, and how absolutely delicious it can be. But of course, it was the 90s. And again, we had like tofu crumbles and like 3 burgers, I think. And tofu crumbles were nothing that was that tasty back then, which is why they're not still around, really. So as time progressed, I've always loved cooking, but then I started getting bored. In 2009, I was working at a natural food cafe, an organic market in Bayshore, and we started diving into raw food. And then that just took off a whole new level for me. So the things that you see here are concoctions that I've made through the years being a gourmet raw food chef. So turnips and beets can take the place of the pasta that's used for raviolis. I call them raviolis because you'll notice through this that I am a huge fan of puns. Zucchini noodles became replacement for regular lasagna noodles, so that I would make lasagnas, and that's what you see here. These are the turnip raviolis. Pizza crusts, I would make them out of seeds and flax, dehydrate them, and then top them with a cashew ricotta and then some chopped vegetables, and then serve them as pizzas. This is where I learned the world of nut cheeses and some of the desserts that I do when I teach a healthy dessert swap class. Raw desserts are a lot easier. I'm not a baker, never have been. My grandmother was amazing with it, but it's a gift that she did not seem to pass down to me so much. So raw desserts became a lot easier because there's not the exact science of measuring and baking and this and that and the other. It's nuts, it's, some agave, some dates, other things, and then that's it. So it's not as hard as anything else, which I love because I love to cook, but I don't have 40 hours to spend in the kitchen all the time like you. So our objectives for tonight, I just want to shift your perspective on the garbanzo bean. I would love for you to love it as much as I do. So I'm going to give you some cute little facts on it. It's extremely versatile. It's nutritional. It's powerful. It's actually very healing for the planet because
I like
chickpeas are a nitrogen fixer. So when you plant chickpeas in the soil, it actually fixes the nitrogen levels, puts it back in the soil where it's supposed to be. So they're actually just an amazing, amazing bean. So it heals you and the planet. And for me, that's just a win-win. Again, you can make them as we go along if you want. So I am going to put up the recipes and then I'll show you the video. If you want to make them, you can make them. And then Q&A, again, as we go along. The 4 recipes that you'll see are the Chickopee Salad. This I actually created a few years ago and at Miller Country Library during their Strictly Business event, I actually showcased the salad. So it goes back a long ways with this library, actually. My hummus, which I call Yummus because it's yummy hummus. Again, I'm a big fan of puns. There is a chickpea flatbread. So it's made with besan. It's not the same thing as chickpea. I'm sorry. It's made with chickpea flour, which is similar to besan. We'll go into that. But it's not the exact same thing. And an omelette, which is also made out of chickpea flour. And then we'll have other options for those recipes too. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll stick around and you can ask me questions on chickpeas or plant-based living or anything else about health that we have or any questions that you have. First up, I consider the chickpea the brick house of legumes because it's one of the most versatile legumes that I know. A 15-ounce can, for those of you that are into getting dried beans versus the cans, a 15-ounce can equals 1.5 cups, costs about $2. A pound, a 1-pound bag of dried chickpeas will yield 6 cups and cost about $2. So you can see by doing the math right there, 1 cup dried equals 3 cups cooked. I'm a big fan of also saving money, especially in this day and age when the prices are going up, 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 and you can buy organic at a cheaper price. I'm going to pick the dried ones. So I do have information on pressure cooking that I can send you as well. So you get a lot of savings, obviously just financially. But when I started looking years ago into other aspects of this, it wasn't just the savings of the money. The fact that there's no EDTA or sodium in your beans when you buy them as a dried bag, because the cans are lined with EDTA to keep them from discoloring while they're in the can. That's a very dangerous chemical. Sodium, we don't need more sodium than we already have. So when you get them dried, you don't have to worry about the sodium. yes, you can get beans in a can that have no or low sodium, but again, I just prefer, I don't really I don't really trust marketers, so I don't trust everything that I read on labels. So I want to be able to have control over what I'm eating, which is another reason why I do it dried myself and then pressure cook them. They actually have a better texture when you do them that way too. It takes about 14 minutes in the pressure cooker, but the texture is way better. It's softer, I find, and a little more palatable for people. My clients like them better than when you get canned beans in the store. They can be a little tough because I don't think they pressure cook them as long as they should, or sometimes they just steam them. There's no can waste when you're doing when you're buying them in a bag. So when I'm making tons and tons of hummus for a health food store and I'm going through a bunch of cans, I started to go, this doesn't seem like it's very eco-friendly, which is the whole reason I do everything that I do. So I started switching to the dried bags. And there's no BPA in the can liner because you have no can liner. So those are a lot of my reasons for pressure cooking. And you can see here, let me just check the chat real quick.
There's a
Yes, thank
question
you.
of the slides.
The
Yeah.
slides, perfect. Yes, thank you. I will absolutely, Edith, I will give him the slides as well. So I'll include those so that you guys can see all of that because yeah, that is kind of an important part, isn't it? So again, just more benefits of a pressure cooker. I'm not going to read all of these. You can read them yourself. But one of the things that I want to point out is organic beans. If you can buy them organic, please do. Again, buying them dried is more cost effective. So it's easier to buy them organic because they'll be cheaper. The problem with conventional beans is that a lot of times they're now spraying them with Roundup, not as a pesticide, but as a desiccant because it dries everything so fast. I worked for a greenhouse for 3 years that used Roundup to kill the weeds, and I can tell you what it does to the weeds. And I promise you, after seeing that, you don't want to actually ingest things that have Roundup after seeing what it does to a plant because it does the same thing to you. So when you're buying the organic beans, it actually keeps you from getting that Roundup. So there's no glyphosate in it. And it does make them more digestible. You can see here in the time frames when they're soaked. So when you soak them just overnight, that's all, I'll have 3 or 4 bowls lying around the kitchen at one time of beans soaking, and it cuts the time in half. So it does take a lot less time and they taste delicious. Charlie, yes, you can cook them in a slow cooker. I don't know the exact method because I've used a pressure cooker for so long. I can look that up and send that to you guys. It takes a lot longer. It's one of those. It's the weird thing that my mom used to always do, where like she would boil it for 2 minutes and then simmer it for an hour, hour and a half, and it never worked for me. So I started doing this. I don't know that the taste and the texture is going to be as good as it would be with a pressure cooker, but you can absolutely use a slow cooker if you want to. So yes, and I'll get you the times for those too. So behind the scenes with the beans, garbanzo beans, there are 2 funny little stories on the origin of where the name chickpeas comes from. One of them was not too nice. That was a name that the Brits gave it, who thought that the little bean looked like chicken food. So it's not really that nice. But I'll take the other story, which is a French name meaning I can't say that. Despite being French, I can't speak French. So it means pea. So we're going to go with the second definition that's on the screen. There's a Basque word that's garbanzo, which is their name of the bean. So you can see how the garbanzo bean got its name. In India, I'm a huge fan of Indian food. Huge, huge, huge fan, which is how I ended up falling so madly in love with chickpeas and started understanding all the things that you could do with chickpeas and chickpea flour and besan. They're known as chana. So you'll see sometimes in restaurants, chana masala, chana dal. That is because that's the chickpea for them. So chana dal is a split version of it, which I'll show you pictures of these too. Gram and besan are the names of the flour that's produced. So they take the bean and pulverize it into a powder, and that's how the flour is produced. That's why it has to sit in the recipes, which we'll cover at the end. But you do have to let the flour sit in water when you mix it before you cook it, because there is a bitter taste because it's a raw bean before you actually cook it. So these are the pictures that I was telling you about. So this is chana dal here up on the top corner. That's just a split chickpea that they use. And then just more little information and different variations of chickpeas, because most of the time we only know about this one chickpea, which is the bigger version of it. And there are 3 others besides that, and there may be actually more than that. But I've had the black ones, the green ones, and the darker ones. The darker ones are very small. They're adorable. They're tiny little small ones. We're again used to the larger ones. And nutritional information of the chickpea, because never underestimate the power. Oh, actually, I think I missed a slide. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Okay, green chickpeas. Sorry about that. We'll go back to that excitement. Green chickpeas are a fresh version that's available in farmers markets. Probably in another couple of months, it would be available if there are farms around here that would actually have it. Kala chana is the black or the brown ones that you saw before. They do take longer to cook. They're more al dente than regular chickpeas. So if you ever see those, they are going to take a little longer to cook, and they are not quite as soft as the big fluffy ones that we're used to. I think they're adorable. When you, I told you I absolutely love these things, and I think they're cute because when you are soaking them, you'll hear little pops. It's almost like little popcorn. So they'll start to make a little popping noise, and you'll hear it all through the night when they're in the bowl. And they do actually sprout, which is awesome too. So you could take those and sprout them and eat them, which increases their nutritional flavor too. I mean, their nutritional profile. They're very umami in flavor. So that is one of the 5 flavors in Asian and an American cuisine too. Umami is almost like a meaty-ish texture. When you're creating vegetarian or vegan foods and you want to give them that kind of meaty flavor, you use the umami flavor. So it's things like tamari, sauteed onions will have that flavor. Chickpeas have that flavor. Nutritional yeast has that flavor, which is why it gives cheese, vegan cheeses, kind of that cheesy-ish flavor, is because of the umami flavor. So I have a client who has to eat all pureed foods, and if there isn't enough chicken for his taste, then I will add chickpeas to it. And I don't tell him, so please don't tell him. But I add chickpeas to it because you can't tell the difference. So it actually boosts the nutritional content in there, and he never knows it. So it's a win-win for everyone. Chickpeas are mostly grown in the US and Washington. They again take 14 minutes in the pressure cooker or 7 to 10 minutes in the Instapot if you have one of those. Oh, and here's the slow cooker method for you. Cover unsoaked chickpeas with 2 inches of water and cook on low heat for 6 to 8 hours. There you go. So I did have it. Okay, thank you. So this is the nutritional information of the chickpea. 1 cup has 210 calories, 3.8 grams of fat, 35 grams of carbs, and 9.6 grams of fiber. That is a lot of fiber, which is something that we need to focus more on than a lot of other things that people are focusing on. So when you subtract the fiber from the grams of carbs, you're actually ending up with 25 grams of net carbs, 6 grams of sugar, 10 grams of protein, which is amazing. And then it has all of those vitamins and minerals in it as well. Okay. So now a moment of pause. Aquafaba is a huge trend that we are finding right now. It's something, it's the foam that comes, it's the liquid that comes when you make beans, any kind of bean, but especially chickpeas. What they're doing is you can actually whisk it and it will make it into egg whites. So you can use it as a meringue. You can use it as an oil replacement if you want to air fry foods. It's also a sauce thickener. I would like to add a word of caution to do that though, because there's a reason that we rinse beans from cans and wash that stuff off. If you ever do that, and I do have a video on YouTube where I show you about this, you'll notice that there's a whole lot of foam that comes out of that. And I question how digestible that is. So I would prefer that we did not necessarily use Aquafaba that much. If you're going to use it once in a while, it's not necessarily that big of a deal. But to use it on a regular basis, I would steer caution against that just because of all the digestive issues that people are having. There's a reason why, again, we rinse them. But if you do want to give it a try again, you will get these slides. Thank you for reminding me about that. And there's a recipe here from Forks Over Knives for Aquafaba whipped cream. So without further ado, I'm going to show you these recipes. So I'm going to stop sharing temporarily. Is that showing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it likes the video. It doesn't like PDFs. All right. So this is the video for it, and then this is the one from Miller Library, actually, Middle Country Library at the Strictly Business event. Chickpea salad. Because every time I go into a deli or a bagel shop, I can't get any of the salads there. So out of frustration, I made my own that health food stores could sell. So we start out with a can of chickpeas. I prefer to pressure cook my beans myself. It's more economical, eco-friendly, and I know what's in it and I don't have to worry about chemicals. So if you're gonna do that, a can of beans equals 1.5 cups. So then what you do is you smush them. This is one of my favorite utensils in the kitchen. Smashed potatoes, smashed chickpeas, smashed anything. This thing is so universal and wonderful. Check it out at your thrift store. I'm sure they have one there, which is where we found it. So you just smash them until they're the consistency you want. This is actually how I make refried beans as well. You just keep smashing them until they're either completely mashed or they have a little bit of texture. Totally up to you. Then you add your mayonnaise. I prefer Hellmann's and Just Mayo. Just Mayo is a little difficult to find lately, so we've been sticking to the Hellmann's version. Dijon mustard. You can use regular mustard if you wish. I just like the flavor of that. Cajun seasoning. And then you want to mix this together so that everything's incorporated first when it comes to the mayonnaise and the mustard. You don't want someone to take a bite of the salad and then all of a sudden have a big blast of mustard or mayo. So this just makes sure it's evenly distributed before you add everything else to it. And you can change the seasonings according to your taste, or you can change them according to the season. If you don't use mayo for whatever reason, tahini also works. And then you add your carrots. I actually used a vegetable peeler to shred those versus taking the food processor down. One of the wonderful souls at one of my cooking demos last year suggested that.
Tried it out, works lovely. And then cucumbers. You can use pickles if you want. You can also obviously change the vegetables around. You can chop the carrots if you'd like. And this, folks, is your chickpea salad. Simple, easy, delicious on a wrap, delicious as a sandwich, delicious just on top of greens. If you want to put it on greens, I do suggest adding a little bit of apple cider vinegar just to make it a little thinner. And that's it. That's it. Easy. Put that on a bagel.
So you see how easy that is. Edith, the Cajun seasoning is not that spicy, but it's a matter of taste. I do have high tolerance for spicy food and actually love ghost peppers, so I might not be the right person to ask. You can use Old Bay seasoning if you'd like. I think that might actually be the ingredient that's used. You can also use any herb or spice blend that you actually like. It doesn't have to be Cajun seasoning. And yes, the substitute for mayo would be, you can either use a cashew cream if you want to use that, or you can use tahini. A friend of mine used to use tahini in hers, and it's actually just as delicious. So that's just fabulous as well. Any other questions before I get to the hummus recipe? Hummus recipe. Okay. So let's get that one going. Alex, is that showing?
Yep, you got it.
Yummus,
Cool.
yummus, yummus. When you take yummy and hummus, it equals yummus. About 20 years ago, a friend of mine worked at a natural food store in St. Pete, Florida. She taught me how to make hummus the way they did it. Lots of lemon, lots of garlic. I've never been able to eat a store brand since then, and I thank her for that. So the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is make sure that you have enough garlic. 4 cloves, about that size. Very simple to do. All you have to do is hit it, cut off the end, and it easily peels for you. And then you just compost that. So you take those, put them in the food processor. Make sure that you puree those first, otherwise you'll have uneven chunks. So once you see that they're minced, then you can go ahead with everything else. This is one of the quickest recipes that you'll make. 4 cups of very hot and delicious chickpeas, garbanzo beans. And yes, I pressure cook those. 2 teaspoons of salt. 3/4 of a cup of lemon. I know it seems like a lot, but again, this is what makes the flavor, and I've made it for food stores forever. And tahini, 1/4 cup. Now, you may find that you'll need to change the consistency depending on the brand of tahini, as some of them are more liquid than others. That brand tends to be a perfect consistency, which is why I stick with it. And then it's very simple. Just puree it until smooth. Once it's smooth, just take that bad boy off. You've got hummus, yummus, whatever you decide to call it. You can scrape down the sides, get any little extra bits in there, and then you just enjoy. This actually makes a really great base for chickless nuggets that we make. You just add gluten flour and some breadcrumbs and Italian seasoning and pesto, and you've got chickless nuggets. Delicious. And that, my friends, is yummus.
So the chickless nugget recipe that I just quickly gave you is one of the bonus recipes that I can give you. You can use a blender if you don't have a food processor. It's just going to be, it may be a little more difficult if it's a narrow base. So, so you'll just have to kind of scrape down the sides a little bit more and make smaller quantities, but you can use a blender. You may want to add a little more liquid to it too. And yes, I know that was a lot of garlic and I know it was a lot of lemon juice, but that's what gives it the flavor. So it is the signature dish of it. Just make sure that you're not breathing right in somebody's face right after you eat it. We eat that hummus on almost everything now. So it's definitely I promise it won't let you down. The next recipe is the chickpea flatbread. So, without further ado,
Chickpea flatbreads. So it doesn't matter if you're gluten-free, it just matters that you want healthier bread. So this is a great alternative that I absolutely love. Chickpea flour is not the same as besan, so you're gonna wanna check the ratios to make sure. This recipe is using chickpea flour. So all we're gonna do is I make a huge batch of the dry mix first. That way I don't have to worry about it when I am making a recipe. I can just pour out the amount I need and I don't have to do all this mixing every single time. So this, my friends, is 1.5 cups of chickpea flour. And then you have baking soda, 3/8 of a teaspoon. And then you have 3/4 of a teaspoon turmeric and 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt. Please make sure it's actually iodized sea salt that you're buying. You want to make sure that your body is getting the iodine that it needs. I learned the hard way about that, and I don't want you to have that same problem. So then you just stir this really well so that everything's incorporated in there. And now essentially your recipe is done. Store this in a leftover glass jar that you have sitting in your cabinet, and then you've got it whenever you want to make chickpea flatbreads. But we're going to take this a step further, because that's what we like to do here. This is very, very simple because it's equal parts. It's going to be a 1/4 cup of this in a bowl. So it's 1/4 cup of your dry mix. Same amount of water, so 1/4 cup of that. And then a teaspoon of lime juice. Then you're going to whisk all that together till it's nice and smooth. And since I have all of this stuff out, I'm actually going to make the omelet mix too, because I like to just make everything ahead. And this is best if you let it sit for a few minutes, preferably at least 5 minutes. Chickpea flour can be very bitter if you don't let it sit. So we're going to let that sit while we prepare everything else, and then we'll take you over to the stove, and then we're going to make stuff really happen. And then you'll see the magic. Oh, hello there. It's time for part 2. You want your pan heated on medium. Ours is a little lower because this is a special power burner. This is the flatbread recipe that I showed you. It's been sitting for a few minutes. Just gonna put that in the pan. These are just like making pancakes. If you've made a pancake, you can make this. And if you haven't, well, here's where we're gonna learn. So what you're gonna do is just let that sit in there. And then when it starts to bubble like pancakes do and it starts to have the holes in it, that's when we'll flip it and it'll be all done. This is where patience comes in handy. So you can see that the edges are starting to form a little bit. And the bubbles are starting to happen. These flatbreads are wonderful. You can stick a burger in them. You can just eat them as is. They don't need butter. They don't need any kind of topping. They're delicious by themselves. So you see how this is like a pancake. It's starting to get those little bubbles in there. The edge is starting to dry out, which is another good sign. You basically just want to make sure that everything's cooked all the way through, and that's what the bubbles are telling you. Okay, now that we have most of this dry and we have bubbles throughout the rest of it, all we're gonna do is flip this bad boy and serve it.
A little note. We have a panini / griddle maker. And so we actually started making the omelets and these flatbreads on the griddle. If you're going to do that, then it needs to be at 375. It actually cooks evenly, a little more even than in a skillet, and it cooks a lot faster. If you don't have one, it's not a big deal. But if you do have one, it's perfect. Yes, you can use olive oil. You're just gonna have to make sure that it's maybe just take like a silicone brush and make sure that it totally covers the pan, just because the sprays do get a more even coat on them. But you can use olive oil and just make sure that you get the that you brush the oil all over the pan so that nothing sticks through. So you can absolutely just use olive oil if you'd like to. I am going to show you, actually, I am going to show you the finished products. So don't worry, I would never tease you like that. I'm not like that. So I'll show you the last one. That's way faster than I expected.
So, you've got chickpea flatbreads. So you got bread taken care of. But what are you gonna do about the egg part? Now what are you gonna eat for breakfast? Got your solution? Also with chickpea flour. This one, don't be scared by all the ingredients. It's very, very simple. Everything is equal portions, and you'll see how fast this will all come together. Then we're gonna let it sit. We're gonna head over to the stove and cook it. And my friends, breakfast will be served. But let's start with the basics. Chickpea flour. So we love chickpea flour. I get a big bag of it. I think it's a 10-pound bag. So we fill 2 of these. That way we have it on hand and I don't have to worry about going to the store and everything. I love buying in bulk. It makes everything a lot easier. So just get out a big bowl. 1.5 cups of that lovely chickpea flour that I showed you. Put it in the bowl. 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. All the ingredients that you'll see here either help it rise, spread, or give it the umami egg flavor. Everything else is 1 teaspoon. So you've got 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Yes, it has parsley because we like it. 1 teaspoon of onion powder. This is black salt. This has a very sulfuric smell to it, to the point that when you first mix water in with this, it's actually going to smell a little bit, well, stinky. Don't actually need that. 1 teaspoon of black pepper. The black pepper is good to, it adds flavor, but it also helps the turmeric become more bioavailable, so it's better for your digestion and your system. 1 teaspoon of turmeric. I told you this was easy, didn't I? Takes you longer to get the ingredients out than it does to actually make it. 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Then you just stir it all up. Make sure that you stir everything really well, especially with having baking powder in there. You want to make sure that it incorporates real well so that these rise properly. That is what baking powder helps you do, helps you rise. And then that's it. So what I do is actually, typically I'll make 4 times the recipe, and then I store it in here. And then I'll just put it in here. That way we just have it every morning when we need it. I have the recipe written on here because it just makes life so much easier than having to flip through a recipe book or something like that. I like things simple. It makes you much more apt to do this. So I just store it in there, and then I store it in a cool, dry place, and then that's it. So to make the real magic happen, this is very similar to the flatbread recipe that I showed you. Equal parts. So you take a half a cup of this lovely mix, and this is enough for 2 people, by the way. And then a half a cup of water. Mix them together. And like I told you with the flatbread, make sure that you let this sit for a few minutes. There's that black salt smell. When you let it sit, it does take out the bitter flavor that the chickpea flour has, because the chickpea flour is just ground up chickpeas. Make sure that you get all the lumps out. We're gonna let this puppy rest, and while this is resting, we're gonna head over to the stove, make the flatbreads, and you, my friends, are gonna have a chickpea protein meal ready. And now, the chickpea omelet. Now, I gave you the measurements for 2 people because, believe it or not, this is a lot more filling than you think it is. So we've already got our pan preheated and sprayed so that it's nice and hot. This is going to be the same concept as the flatbreads. You're just going to want to let it sit until you see all the bubbles, so that you know it's cooked through. You can make it a little thicker if you want. You can also make it a little thinner. This is the consistency we like because you can stuff this, you can put a cheesy sauce on it, you can do a lot of things with it. Thinner tends to fall apart. This isn't a crepe, it's supposed to be an omelet. And it'll do the same thing as the flatbreads. The outside is going to dry first. You're going to start to see the bubbles like a pancake. And then you're going to flip it over. It'll be a nice golden brown. Hopefully, that's what we're hoping for. And then you can put stuff on the inside. Now, sometimes I'll put greens on top before I flip it. I'll put tomatoes on it. You can do that too. A lot of times we'll just cook it as is, especially if you've got 2 people and they eat theirs differently. So you'll flip it, and then when it's done, you can stuff it with black beans and tomatoes and salsa, or cauliflower and broccoli or greens. You've got a whole world of options for these omelets. Anything that you'd normally do with a regular omelet. Sometimes I'll even put organic soy bacon bits on it. So now you see that this is dry around the edges, and all the bubbles are there. So we're gonna take this, make sure it's loose all around, and then flip. And then that's it.
So that right there was the picture of what they look like. I'm not going to lie. The flatbreads and the omelet look exactly the same. So when you cook them, they're going to look the same. The omelet is a little thicker though because of the ingredients in it. So it does look, let me just share that again so that you see it. But this is what this is what it looks like. So this is it stuffed with like cauliflower, bell peppers, there's tomatoes in there. And then I put greens on this version before I flipped it. And then when I was done, I just put cheesy sauce that I make in there on top of it too. So sometimes if we're doing a breakfast version, like a black bean version for breakfast, then we'll stuff it with the vegetables and the black beans. And then instead of just plain cheesy sauce, I'll mix a little bit of salsa in with that cheesy sauce and make like a queso. So you've got a whole lot of options. It's really one of those recipes that's only limited by your imagination. It's got a whole ton of different options for it. What I want to do, because I did not, is I want to actually finish sharing with you the actual nutritional information for the chickpea flour. So you have all of these. Let me run through this real quick. Hummus, a couple of alternatives for hummus. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit for you. So for the hummus, you can add hot sauce. You can add jalapeno to it. You can add roasted pepper or cumin if you want to. You can make hummus with black beans. And if you do that, then you're going to want to use the cumin in it if you like cumin. I know some people do have an aversion to it. But black bean hummus, same ingredients, just use cumin in there too. The chickless nuggets, again, is made with the hummus, and then you add vital wheat gluten and breadcrumbs and whatever spices. Last time I made it, I didn't actually use pesto because I used to make pesto with oil, and we stopped eating that. So now I just make it without the pesto altogether, and it actually is just delicious. And it's a lot, it'll get the same kind of consistency, that little bit of stringy that chicken nuggets have, but it tastes a lot better. It's homemade. You know what the heck is in it. It's healthy, and it only takes a few minutes to cook, and then you can put those on the flatbreads actually. The hummus can also be a salad dressing base if you thin it. Sometimes I'll purposely make a thinner batch of hummus and use it just as almost like a salad dressing instead of on the salad as hummus. Banza pasta. If you have not ever had banza pasta, I highly, highly recommend it. We had it last night in as a soup. It's absolutely delicious. It's just made with chickpeas. It has the closest texture to actual pasta that I've ever had, but it's high in fiber and nutrients, so it's perfect. Chickpea nuts, if you ever want to make those, you air fry them 12 to 15 minutes at 400, or you can actually just bake them at that temp as well. Chickpeas, yes, the chickpeas, let me go back a slide because the chickpea fiber content is right on there. So it has 9.6 grams of fiber per cup of chickpeas. So they're high in fiber. And so that's the recipe. Again, you'll get these. And chickpea flour nutritional information. So on chickpea flour, which I lied in the video, we actually buy a 20-pound bag. I just bought one and didn't realize we went that crazy with it, but we do buy 20 pounds of it in one shot. So chickpea flour, 1 cup has 356 calories, 6 grams of fat, 53 grams of carbs, and 10 grams of fiber. So it ends up being 43 grams of net carbs. So it is a little higher in carbs. 10 grams of sugar, 21 grams of protein though too. And again, a lot of times you're not going to eat a whole cup of chickpea flour just because it is so filling. It's also really high in nutrients. So you can see the vitamins and minerals that are in that. So it's a flour house legume for sure. So in the video, I referenced that chickpea flour and besan are not the same thing. and they are not. They're made from two different sources. The flour actually requires more water than besan. So again, when I've given you the recipes, I'm talking about chickpea flour. If you happen to have grabbed besan for whatever reason, just make sure that you use a little bit less water. And these are real forgiving recipes. This isn't like baking. So if you happen to say it's, a little moisture out and you add a cup of the chickpea flour and a cup of the water and it's too wet, you can just add more flour. Like, it's a very forgiving recipe. So it's not something that you have to be held down to and worry about if it happens to be thinner than you want. Just add more flour. Chickpea flour is used to keep yogurt from separating during cooking. So if you're making a soup, Indian soups a lot of times will use yogurts in there. So if you have like your almond yogurt, soy, whatever it is, and you add it to it, it's going to start curdling when you put it in the soup. So what they will do is add the chickpea flour to the yogurt, mix it up, and then add it to the soup, and that keeps it from actually curdling. So chickpea flour is again, my mind is just boggled at the amazing amount of things that you can do with it. Uh, the flatbread, we made a thin version of the flatbread and dipped our bread in it and then made French toast out of it. So you can use it as like an egg batter as well. The omelette, you can use that also as a batter for French toast that's more savory. So say you don't want a sweet version, you want something that's a little more savory and you want to put like a cashew cream cheese or something in it, you can absolutely do that. So you have a lot of other options with these recipes besides just having them as a flatbread or an omelette. Naan using chickpea flour, that's another one of the bonus recipes that I can send you. And you can also make pizza crusts out of these. You just would make the recipe and then just top it and with your toppings and then put it in the oven. Vegan Richa has a cookbook which uses tofu. She makes chickpea flour into a tofu. So for people that can't have soy, there is that option. Soca is an Italian dish that uses chickpea flour as a bread or like a polenta. So chickpea flour has been around a long time. It's just suddenly starting to gain popularity here, which is awesome because more people could definitely use chickpea flour. It's awesome. Chickpea flour fudge, I have not tried it because, again, I'm not a baker. I didn't get that gift and we don't really eat sweets, but you can make chickpea flour into sweets too. There are a couple of Indian recipes that actually use chickpea flour, and I can't pronounce the name of it, but it's one of my favorites, and it's dipped, I think, in honey or something. Pakoras are an Indian fritter that use chickpea flour. They're fried. So if you take chickpea flour and you chop up, or you can just buy a bag of mixed vegetables and then add that to it. You could actually do this with the flatbread recipe. So just add some, say you get a bag of organic mixed vegetables, put them in there once they're thawed, mix it all up, add some spices, and then saute that. Then you've got your own version of pakoras, and they're not deep fried because sometimes Indian food is, while it's very delicious, it is not always the healthiest here. Chickpea flour is amazing on air fries. So this you would actually just use dry. So we'll take the chickpea flour and just put a small coat around our fries before we pop them in the air fryer, and then it'll make a batter. Or you could actually use it as a batter, dip the fries in it, and then put them in the air fryer. It's just a little messier that way, but you can actually do that. So there are a lot of options for it. You can actually bake with chickpea flour. So you can replace some of your regular flour with chickpea flour if you want to boost the protein content. You do just have to be careful. Only up to a third of the regular flour substituted with chickpea flour. You got to watch the cooking time though, because of the high protein content, the chickpea flour will actually burn faster, but you do still have that option. These are just the differences between besan and chickpea flour. I'm not going to read all of them to you because it's right there on the screen. But chickpea flour is made from, again, a different bean than the besan, but they're both gluten-free. They're both very high protein. And again, remember to adjust the baking time. The chickpea flour, however, is better for baking than besan. So remember in that last slide where I told you you could use it as a substitute for regular flour, just make sure it's the chickpea flour and not the besan. And they both have a very similar flavor. So this is just what they look like. It's just one is made from this bean and one is made from this bean, and that's the only difference. But remember, this one is the one that takes a little longer to cook and it is a little more al dente. And where? So the recipes, again, you'll get the recipes. This is when we made the chickless nuggets one time, I decided to make one into like a chicken patty size. And then we made actual chickless franchise with it. So we made it's the same exact way that you make chicken franchise, but used the hummus mixed with vital wheat gluten and breadcrumbs and spices. And then we cooked it, dredged it in flour. This is broth. This is not oil. We don't ever use that much oil. We don't use oil at all, except for tiny bits. So then we cooked it in a broth, a lemon white wine vinegar broth, and then simmered it, and then garlic, and then served it. Same. So it's the same recipe as chickless franchise. But that's another option that you have for the chickless nuggets. And again, that's what the chickless nuggets look like. So if you had them, I used to serve them in a pita with a local juice bar. So it would be the chickless nuggets with some greens and shredded carrots and cucumbers, and then a little side of dressing. And then these are the bonus recipes too. And then when you get the slides, you'll also see this. They're the top 19 healthy chickpea recipes from Forks Over Knives, and they're one of my favorite places to go to for fast, healthy recipes that don't use oil. And that is that. So, any questions for you guys? I'm going to stop for a second and get some water.
Thank you, Alicia. That was very, very. I'm starving. I could tell you that much. Very insightful. I learned a lot. I don't know if you saw some of the last questions there in the chat. You might have covered them already, but I believe you did. But
got the fiber content. Thank you, Charlie. I will get that.
Okay, so you must be.
Yes. And let me see. I don't think I have. I didn't take an actual picture of the flatbread because again, it looks like it's called, I call it an omelette, but in India they do call it chila as well. So that picture that you saw of it folded over with all the veggies and the queso on top of it, that's chila. It again looks exactly the same as the flatbread. So we didn't take a picture of the flatbreads, but it looks just like that. And you can fold them over, and we use those a lot now instead of bread. Like I said, I'll make the veggie burgers that I make and then put them in that, or meatballs, just because it's a healthier option than bread, and we don't always want to have sprouted bread or gluten. You know, we limit it to an extent, so you have a whole lot of options with them. And I think actually I covered everything that I wanted to. Got all the recipes, yeah. So if you guys have any questions, let me know while you still have me.
Thank you
And
so much. It was wonderful. I want to apologize to everybody for that little disturbance that we had. I don't know how that came. That's never happened to me before on a Zoom. I know it has happened to other libraries, other Zoom meetings in general, but I tried to stop it as soon as I could, but I apologize for anything that was in the chat or said on video.
oh, not your fault. We're all adults here, right? We can handle that. We can handle stuff like that. Whatever.
They kept trying to
Lost,
get
not
in
ours.
though. They
Yeah, I
kept
know.
you could see there's more people that registered for the program like in the last 5 minutes because they keep trying to
Yeah. I feel official. I've been bombed. I've been like,
right.
yes, I've gone into those ranks. The best place to buy organic garbanzo beans, I'll be honest, the cheapest that I find is buying it in bulk. So a place like Wild by Nature will have them in bulk. I'm sure Whole Foods and Trader Joe's has them. I don't go to those places. I just stick with Wild by Nature. You can buy them organic in cans at Stop and Shop. Like a lot of the grocery stores are having them. Again, depends on whether or not you want to buy dried or you want to buy them in the cans. Black salt, we get on ours on Amazon because either that or I'll go to Patel Brothers in Hicksville and get the black salt there because they obviously have it. It is very pink. It's not the same as pink Himalayan salt. It does have a very farty smell to it. So it's a whole lot different. But the sulfur content is what gives it some of that eggy flavor too. And some of the nutrients that are in it. So you can use Himalayan salt. It's not gonna have the exact same flavor, but don't kill yourself trying to find black salt if you can't find it. It's not a big deal. You can use pink Himalayan salt if you'd like, or iodized sea salt. Yes, I am looking for that recipe about the sausage. There is a garbanzo flour recipe that someone I know on Gab. She makes chickpea sausages, and I can't get her to give up the recipe yet. But there is a recipe for the sausages that I'm still looking to find. Vegan Richa may have them because she's Indian and she has a lot of those recipes in her cookbook. So she may have it. I have her cookbook and I couldn't find it in there. But I will keep looking for it because I am so obsessed with trying to find that one because I want to make my own sausages that are easier, and garbanzo flour is pretty easy. So I'm going to make a note to see if I can find that again because I had forgotten about it and you just reminded me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here, joining
Absolutely.
Alicia and I. Let's give a round of applause for Alicia.
A round of
Even those
applause
with
for all you
their
guys. Yay. Thank you.
Alicia will be returning with another program. I don't know the exact date. Of course, I don't know the exact date off the top of my head.
Did we decide it? Because if we did decide it, I have it.
Yeah, I had you said the title of it or something close to it in the beginning.
Yeah, we do have a date. It's July 19th and it's the whole food plant-based substitution class.
Yes,
So
that is it.
that is actually another class that I wrote at the request of the school unit in Maine. And we ran that earlier in the year, and that's a fun one because we talk about substituting flours and sugars and different ways that you can actually use whole food substitutions for that are healthier for different things. Even if you're not plant-based, there's still healthier options that you can use. A lot of them I learned from Ruby when I took a course with them through Forks Over Knives. I am certified as a no oil chef through Forks Over Knives. And I learned a lot of those things from them, like fruit pastes and stuff like that. So that's July 19th, same time, 6 to 7:30. So that's another one that you'll see on MPL's Middle Country Public Library's website.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope you
Thank you,
all will
Michael.
sign up and join us. And
Yeah, that'll be fun.
thank you again, Alicia. This was great. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
hope everyone has a good night, and thanks again. We'll see you hopefully on July 19th.
Yes, thank you. And you guys will have all of these recipes. I will send them to Alex tomorrow, so you will all have them ASAP. And then if you want to send me
Absolutely.
feedback, please do. I love it.
Definitely.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the night and wonderful rest of the week.